Hey everybody, welcome to episode 51 of the Half Priced Concessions Podcast. This week, our featured guest is Tony Stevens. You probably know from the Solid Rock Carriers Cars Tour, Late Model, and Super Late Model Tour. Also, you might know Tony from his production company, Pit Road TV, that features streaming services of asphalt races, dirt races, and also kart races, and probably a whole bunch more coming soon. Sat down with Tony to talk about how his year went in 2020 for Pit Road TV, the things he's looking for on the horizon as streaming services for local and grassroots racing continue to develop, and so much more. We're glad you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube. However you're listening, please hit the subscribe button. If there's a section to give us a rating and review like there is on Apple, please do so. That would really help us out a ton. And I tell you what, if you leave a good enough review, we'll give you either a shout out on the air or maybe we got some prizes coming. So make sure you leave us a good review, or hey, if you don't like the show, leave us an honest review. We love the constructive criticism and want to be better in each way. But enough about us. On the other side of this break, we're talking to Tony Stevens here on the Half Price Concessions Podcast.
Planning on doing some digging in your yard? Your simple backyard project could quickly turn dangerous. Buried underground cables and lines are just inches below the surface. So don't forget to make one very important call to 811. Calling 811 is the first step in having your buried utilities marked so you know where it is safe to dig. 811 is free, it's fast, and it's the law. For digging projects big or small, make the call to 811.
This episode of the Half Price Concessions Podcast is brought to you with support from Performance Center Racing Warehouse. In addition to being the home of the PRW chassis, Performance Center offers in-house setups and consulting, plus suspension and chassis pull-down analysis, along with their fabrication shop that can re-clip your race car with the fastest turnaround in the industry. Give Roger Johnson and the Performance Center team the chance to earn your racing business by calling them today at 704-838-1400 or visit them online at performancecenter.com. That's PERFORMANCENTER.com. Here on the Half Price Concessions Podcast, Tony Stevens joins me. We've been meaning to do this for a while, Tony, but your schedule has got to be the most insane, if not one of the most insane in racing. So now that this thing's slowed down a little bit, are you catching your breath a little bit, or is it a bad thing that you've got enough time to catch your breath because that means you're not working as much?
I honestly don't even know what day it is right now. I was talking to somebody last night, so I went, yeah, today's Friday, right? They're like, no, today's Saturday. I went, oh.
Oh, so, just genuine. You weren't being funny about
no,
it.
I legit didn't know what day it was, but this has been the first week I've sat around and, quite frankly, not really done a whole lot of anything. There have been some things I've done, but I've just kind of took this week to chill, and it's been good.
Yeah.
I forgot what that's like.
About to say, you gotten caught up on some sleep, maybe. Have you had a chance to kind of, the racers in this time are usually tearing down equipment, seeing what's broken, getting things fixed. Do you have something like that you have to do with your streaming stuff and all your equipment?
That was on my agenda for Friday, and considering I didn't roll out of the bed till about 2:30 in the afternoon, that didn't get done. So, but yes, I do. I've got a list of stuff I want to get knocked out with. Just some equipment maintenance and reorganizing some stuff and rearranging and, trying to get a direction for next year and different things. So yeah, there's same thing. We've got stuff we'll do in the quote unquote off season, just like you would have it with a race car. Yeah.
So 2020 was, with everything that was happening, with the pandemic, with crowd restrictions and all this stuff, it kind of seemed like streaming got really pushed forward out of really more necessity, maybe. I mean, it had been growing in popularity, obviously, as you know, you got into it for that reason, but this year it got really shoved forward. From your vantage point, with your work with Cars Tour and your work as with Pit Road TV, obviously, as your company, in like maybe 5 sentences or less, or if you want to go further, go ahead. We don't have a time limit. How would you kind of summate Tony Stevens' 2020?
Everybody forgets it started in January, right? We all forget that the year started in January, and we were looking to have a good year. Everything was indicative that we were going to have a good year, and a lot of things are moving forward. And so we entered the year with a lot of a lot of things that we hadn't done before on the plate. All good as far as I'm concerned. And then obviously things happened, and we had a big question mark like a lot of people did. We're very fortunate to be on the Speed Sport TV platform. So there's a lot of folks that we can pull information from and do different things with and whatnot. And we learned very quickly that the streaming and the broadcasting and all the media stuff was going to be a lot more popular than we ever expected. And I don't think it wasn't rocket science. After about a month, everybody figured it out, right? But nobody knew. Everybody had question marks for everything. But we realized very quickly that folks wanted to consume racing. They wanted to somehow support their driver, their track, their whatever. They wanted to consume motorsports, and when they didn't have it, obviously, it made it that much harder. So we realized very quickly it was going to be one of those years where it was like, buckle up, hold on, and just make it happen. And that's kind of what we did. There were some weeks we didn't know what we did. I mean, I've had at least 2 events this year, if not more, where I've had staff call in some cases less than 24 hours before we were on air, and go, hey, I either got exposed to COVID with my roommate, family member, friend, significant other, whatever, or, yeah, I just took a test and I'm positive or whatever. It's like, oh, crap.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things we had to do in that buckle up and hunker down mode, but we still made it happen. And we're fortunate enough to have a lot of good staff, a lot of good people that stepped up and made some things happen maybe otherwise it wouldn't have, and some tracks and promoters and events that are able to work with us. I mean, overall, it was still a good year despite all the hurdles and challenges we were having to go through.
Would you agree with me that obviously the streaming of races has been getting pushed forward? Combine that with a global pandemic where, a lot more people are stuck in their home than probably they wanted to be or ever were, plus what has been coming down the pipe the last 5, 6, 10 years of cord cutting. I think it kind of just came to a head, didn't it, for people like you and all these other streaming companies?
Yeah, it really did.
Because who wants to buy cable anymore? There's so much stuff out there that all you need is an internet signal, and you're just as entertained, if not more entertained, than what's on the spectrum or whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you're like me, you buy cable for 4 channels, right? I mean, you're going to watch one of 4 or 5 channels, and that's it, and you're still paying. In my case, you don't want to know what I'm paying, but you're still paying. Most of mine's for internet service, but you're still paying this ginormous figure every month, and you're going to pay to be entertained no matter what you're doing, right? If you want to go to baseball games, if you want to watch racing, if you want to watch people bake cakes in a contest, I don't care. You're going to pay to be entertained, and in a way, it's a good thing and a bad thing. Cable masterminded the distribution mechanism by which they were able to monetize all these channels and get them into 100 million homes, and every network went, hey, we're getting our 10 cents a month from every subscriber, whether they watch us or not, we're happy. Well, that's fine when they're being pushed into 100 million homes at 10 cents a subscriber, but the downside of the internet distribution is you don't pay for what you don't want to watch. So when you start doing the math, obviously, then it's different. So all of a sudden now, instead of 100 million households, you're doing really, really, really good, like fantastically good, to get into 100,000 households, right? Truth be told, you're doing great to get in 100 households. So that whole thing kind of changed the economics of it all. But ultimately, it's still good, I think, because it allows people to pick and choose what they want to watch, pick and choose how they want to be entertained. It makes it harder sometimes as a content provider because you don't know what you want to do or what you want to get, and there's a lot of unknowns still. But ultimately, I think for the fan, it's a good thing because more and more people are going to things that they wouldn't have otherwise been able to do, right? Yeah. I mean, it's been 5 years ago now, but let's say 10 or 12 years ago, there's no way in the devil you're going to get Speed, or to go back even further, TNN or ESPN or whoever, to show up and do car store races, for instance, with any financial structure that makes sense for anybody involved except the network. Because there's an expense to produce those, and the series didn't really have that kind of money. Hooters did because it was Bob Brooks paying for it as a tax write-off because he just loved racing. But other than that, nobody really had the cash to do that stuff. ASA worked an ownership deal with TNN, and they had a lot of good things going on their end, but those are few and far between. Yeah. And even so, there might be just as good a racing in your outlaw class at your local track, but nobody got to see it, right? So what it has done is it's kind of opened up the door for a lot of people to see more of what they want. Folks to, in a way, tell people what they want to see. And then, okay, yeah, there's enough support for this. Let's figure out a way to show more of these deals or whatever. So in a way, it's a good thing. I think it's given more to the fan. But you're right, it's kind of converged, and it's been good and bad.
Yeah.
Because
there's a lot more competition now in your space than there used to be.
Yes, there's a lot more competition in the space. There's plenty of events. And on the same note, the fan base isn't growing, at least not in the method that we would like to think it is or see it is, right? What that fan base is, I don't know. Is it 100,000 people, 5 million people, 100 million people? I don't know, right? But that fan base isn't really expanding. I mean, you can look at the NASCAR numbers and see they're not growing by any leaps and bounds. They're not really shrinking either, truth be told. They're staying within a range and up and down and up and down. So that fan base isn't really growing, so to speak. So you've got a finite fan base, and when you've got 50 people broadcasting a race in a given weekend, those X number of people are going to pick what they're going to want to watch, as long as they can watch it however they want to watch it, and they're only going to pick 1, 2, 3, 4 things. So it does make it a little harder because you're competing for more and more eyeballs when more and more are being distracted. So yeah, it's been good and bad though. But like you said, it's taken more of those eyeballs and said this is the only way you can consume racing this year if you want to consume it at all. So overall, it's still been good because it's forced them to say, well, let's look at the product and see what it is. Yeah. And I think overall that's been a good thing.
How many years is this now for you out on your own? I know you had done it for a little bit before. I remember you texted me and said you were going to finally take the leap, the full leap, I should say. So, how many years has it been? 4 or 5?
It's been about 5.5 years now.
Okay.
It was middle of 15 when we finally did the full jump. Yeah. But yeah, we've been doing it for a while in various capacities, either as a subcontractor for some other folks, or we had started the car store stuff by that point, but I still had a quote unquote day job then. Yeah. So, it's been a while. It doesn't seem that long.
I know, it really doesn't. The time really flew by.
Then there are days it does seem that long.
Yeah, I'm about to say. I could think of a few already off the top of my head.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, it's gone pretty well, all things considered.
Yeah. So add that in with your announcing, because as long as I've known you, you've been steady announcing, whether it was UARA or when you was working with Doc Love and Alan Dietz, and then you went over to Pro Cup. And it was funny. I don't know if I ever told you this. The year you got the Pro Cup job, when it was still the old,
when it was still Pro Cup.
When it was still Pro Cup, I was trying to get the job too. I had gone out to eat.
Well, that explains a lot.
Yeah, I'm about to say, that's why your salary went down. No, but
I think it's more why it went up. They realized how valuable. I'm kidding.
Did the two correlate anything to you as far as your experience announcing to learning how to do the streaming thing, or was it just a completely different animal and you treat them as two separate, complete entities?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Because I'd always been intrigued by the video stuff for a long time. The announcing stuff, honestly, was a complete accident. I never had an intention, I mean, we're going back a ways now, but I never had an intention to ever do anything like that. It just sort of happened that way. I remember I had a high school teacher once, and this is amazing for the teachers that you might have listening or whatever. Sometimes one little thing they say can, affect a kid's life forever. But I had a teacher. She was like the acting teacher, and she did some stuff with the TV studio people and whatever else. And by that point, I was involved with them doing production on, like, we had a live morning show at school, and we did some stuff like that, and we did some different things along those lines. And I enjoyed that. But I'm like a lot of folks. I hated the sound of my own voice.
I think everybody does. I can't think of a soul.
Exactly. Everybody does. I know this now. At the time, I didn't. So it's like, I don't know. Well, anyway, she made the comment once about how you've got a great voice for announcing something or something along those lines. And I'm like, just completely unsolicited. And I was like, really? Okay, whatever. So
at least she didn't tell you had a face for radio. A lot of us have been told that.
I think she was probably blind anyway to see that. So that's why she come in on my voice, apparently. But yeah, and so that just sort of started to slowly brew. And of all things, so everybody has their love-hate relationship with iRacing and everything that's going on the last 12 months or so. But I really started to get my feet underneath me with this whole production and announcing thing, doing what was the predecessor to iRacing. So like the Papyrus Sims and things like that, the NASCAR racing series, we would do those things on radio. We would do them over video. We did all kinds of things like that. And that's probably been 20 some years now that started. And I remember going to a buddy of mine's in high school, and I would take a computer, and he had I think his computer had a video out or something at the time, which was like this big deal. Now they've all got HDMI outs and everything, right? But at the time it was like, holy cow. So I remember I took a VCR I had at the house up there. It's getting wild,
Now we're dating how old you are.
So I took a VCR up to the house and had audio plugs and video plugs. I had like a cheap little mixer I bought, well, somewhat cheap at the Radio Shack, because at my church at the time I was doing some audio stuff. I was like, wait, we can put this in here and we can put the video in. Oh, we can actually voice this over and do a thing. So we did. It was probably terrible, truth be told. But we thought it was cool, right?
You found something there in yourself that was intrigued by that.
Right. It was like, okay, this is neat. We can do this. So we went down the road with the sim racing stuff, and that ultimately led to more opportunities in the real world for me. And one thing led to another. And next thing you know, here we are.
Yeah. It's pretty wild.
It's nuts.
Did you, I don't know if I've ever asked you this, did you ever feel like, because with the announcing that you were doing, I don't want to toot your horn, but you were decent. I'm
glad you used the past tense there, because that's about how I feel.
I will say your presence at a race one time made me respect the event more, and I'll tell you why. Because so many races that I went to as a kid and still as an adult, the only guy talking is the guy up in the tower. Yeah, the PA announcer. It's just him. He goes down and does interviews. Well, when I would see you at like a UARA race or whatever it was, and you were a pit reporter, in my mind, I'm like, wait a minute. Only MRN and PRN have those things, or IndyCar. This race is big enough to have a pit reporter? Like, just you doing that in my race fan mind made it think like, man, this thing's legit. Like, this is something. And it's amazing how, I didn't know you from Adam or nothing, but just the fact of that made it feel like a bigger event to me. And I think for a lot of that's probably part of what makes the car store races feel special, because it's like, not only is it a really good group of drivers and it's a big show, but it feels bigger because it's big enough to warrant the cameras, whether they're the big $100,000 ones that Fox or whoever has, or the smaller ones that you have. Would you agree with me on that, saying like, now that makes the casual fan look around me like, man, this is big enough for this? Like, this is,
absolutely.
It makes it feel more important.
I would agree. I mean, even something as simple as an additional announcer that's in the pits or whatever to tell their stories, to me, that's where the race actually happens. Because any idiot, me included, can sit there on the outside of the racetrack and tell you what they see, because everybody else sees the same thing.
Yep.
Right? We can guess, we can speculate, we can do whatever we want to do. We're just the one that's lucky enough, or somebody was stupid enough to put a microphone in our hand. Right? So we don't do anything really special. But the guy in the pits, he gets all the stories. Right? So they're able to say, oh, well, the guy's falling back because, the tire's flat, the transmission's blowing up, whatever. And then you get those raw emotional reactions, good and bad. And to me, that's where the story is, that's where the drama is, and it does provide an additional voice, an additional viewpoint, and it does feel like a bigger event. I would give you that for sure. And even to your point of the cameras, emphasis on plural. Everybody now seems like has a camera in an event, which is great. I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And
we mean a camera, not mama in the grandstands who is
Right.
Facebook Live. We're talking about like an actual camera.
An actual camera. Because the more cameras you have, and I think folks have kind of started to figure this out, it costs money for equipment and people to go to these races. And what pays for that is the interest of fans, as we discussed earlier, because it's a big enough event that they're interested in seeing it. And the better we can present that and portray it and illustrate it and entertain folks with it, the better off we are. But yeah, if 20 people want to watch the show, you'll be lucky to have one camera, right? But if 20,000 people want to watch the show, and don't get me wrong, if you find an event like that, we're all gonna be jumping at it and screaming for it. But that's gonna be able to pay for a Fox production, right? So you've got to have that interest in it, and ultimately having all that, it's kind of that deal of a crowd breeds a crowd. So you get 2,000 people at the racetrack and they see this as a big deal, well, they tell their buddies about it. and the next time there's 2,500 people, and they've all told their buddies about it too, and some more come and some more tune in, and they say, wow, this is a good deal. So some more come and some more tune in, and it just gradually starts to build on itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, it certainly does help that aura of the event to have the whole thing there, be it multiple announcers, multiple cameras, whatever. The more you can do, this is getting to my event promoter wannabe side, the more you can do to make that feel like a big event, the more it is a big event.
Yeah. I don't know if a lot of people know this, unless they stalk your Facebook page, which hopefully no one's doing that. But there were so many of those early events you were doing that I think was pre-Pit Row TV, was when you were doing that other deal. You were the lone cameraman. You were doing the announcing for the streaming. I mean, all that entailed all by yourself, plus setting up the equipment, plus troubleshooting it and having to, did you ever at one of those where you were having to do everything by yourself go, man, this is too much work?
Yeah.
You did?
Many times. Many times. And I went, what else is there to do? I can go get a real job.
Yeah.
But a real job might not let me come do this stuff, right? And I was either passionate enough or dumb enough or both to say, I'm going to figure out a way to make this work. And so far, I figured out a way to make it work.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are events that, even still to this day, where I'll get 3 to 4 hours of sleep before an event because there's still so much to do. I've got great staff and great people that we're able to train and teach things, and they know a lot on their own, and we're able to incorporate that in. But me wanting to be always better, okay, great. Person A, person B, and person C can handle these things. I can do all this other stuff now. Well, you could sleep too. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, you could get some sleep.
Right. So, but yeah, it started out with you do everything. You're the one-man jam, the one-man band, and that's what you do. And, there are still occasions we do that for certain events. It's not nearly what it once was, but, I've been there and done that before. I told you earlier this year we had to make things happen. There was a race I went to. Guy called me after I was at one racetrack Saturday night and said, hey, we rained out, we're ready to Sunday. If we run Sunday, can you come up here and do it after you're done at this racetrack? And I went, you got to be kidding me. It's 2 hours away from home, away from the direction I need to be going. And they're probably not going to be done until 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
So I got to pay for another hotel room, and I got to stay away from home for another day. Fine, I'll come do it.
Yeah.
And it was the same deal. It was the one, and if you go back and look through archives, you could probably figure this out, but it was a track where I had to do everything at some point during the day.
Yeah.
Because the track announcer there runs a car in one of the classes.
Oh.
And the only reason he was really announcing was because there was a broadcast. Otherwise, there was no reason to have an announcer, right?
Yeah.
So he went down to go race in the class before his. So I was stuck on the camera stand trying to announce, shoot, produce, do everything for the last 2 classes of the night. We did it. We got through it. The fans enjoyed it. They got to support the racetrack. And through those broadcasts, we did a handful of them at a particular racetrack this year, a few of them. That helped them keep the doors open. And, so we're glad we got to do that. But it's just like, man, the stuff that, we still do some of the crazy stuff we used to do.
What are a little inside baseball? Because you don't typically show up the day of. You're at a racetrack the day before, 2 days before, whatever, setting up equipment, running cables. If you go to a car store show listening to this, you're probably going to see some of Tony's wires somewhere. What is, just for those that are curious, what is the biggest equipment hurdle that you typically face through a season as far as making sure everything's set up? Like what's a thing you have to fight through on a semi-regular basis?
Well, there's multiple ones. It depends on where we're at and what we're doing. But some of the ones we have to worry about, number one is internet service. Contrary to popular belief, there's not internet service everywhere.
Yeah.
And cell phone towers in more remote areas of the country are made for smaller groups of people.
They're not built to handle the kind of traffic you're trying to put on it.
Well, correct. So let's just take, for instance, case in point, Orange County. Orange County is out in the corner of nowhere next to one of the least populated counties in the state of North Carolina, right? So getting any sort of broadband internet out there is a challenge. As an aside, they're working on solutions for that, hopefully that are done this year, but we'll find out. But yeah, getting broadband internet out there is a challenge. So you have cell phones, and cell phone technology is great, and it works fantastic to where you can download stuff, upload stuff, stream video, whatever, that's fine. But any given tower is only made for X number of people. So if it's made for 2,000 people and there's 5,000 people at a race and they're all on their phones at the same time, guess what's going to happen?
Crash.
It's going to clog up.
Yeah.
Right. So that's probably our biggest hurdle we face at any racetrack, is making sure we have good internet.
Yeah.
Because without that, we're not getting out to the world. So once we get past that, and we've learned a lot of things in that aspect over the last 5-6 years, and we still continue to learn. But once you get past that, it's a matter of where do you put cameras, how do you get a cable to and from said camera, and depending on how you set it up, audio. I don't think it's a challenge, and I don't think it's a secret that probably the most challenging place we have for audio, at least on its face, is Carteret County. The PA system is under the flag stand, the cameras are up top, and if we set up a production system anywhere, it's somewhere in the middle. So we got to figure out how to get audio to and from, and that makes it a little bit of a headache. Fortunately, there it's open, and the actual execution is easier, but it still poses a challenge. And there's other tracks. You got to go through walls, around walls, down hallways, upstairs, you name it. Plug into a mixer that has been there since 1953.
Yeah.
And they didn't know what an XLR cord was, or they didn't have, or infested with hornets, or what have you, right?
Or snakes.
Or
if you
snakes.
got certain racetracks in the tower.
Spiders, whatever. But those are probably the other ones that you have to deal with. But internet's certainly the biggest one. After that, it's a matter of just getting cables and cords and cameras to the right places. With the bigger shows, the things that we face are getting enough cable, or let me back up, not too much cable from point A to point B. If you understand anything about electricity, you understand it's just like an electric, extension cord. After you go so long, it's like a giant resistor. So you lose a certain amount of current. Video is no different. It's just very low voltage. So you can only go so far before you lose signal. So we have ways to get stuff from point A to point B that's over that amount of time. Rockingham's going to be the biggest challenge we have this year, hands down.
Just because of the size of the facility?
Because of the size of the facility. And Charlotte, when we do summer shootout, is all set up with a lot of stuff that make our life easier. We still have to tap into it and make it work, but it's all there. Rockingham never got done back in the day, so we're having to lay the entire infrastructure ourselves and work with the racetrack at least to get some of that infrastructure put in. The rest of it, bringing it ourselves or installing it ourselves or whatever. So that's going to be the biggest challenge we have to deal with. But even so, they at least have internet in Rockingham, so that should be the least of our problems.
Wasn't there a track you had to go to, or you've had to go to on a regular basis, where maybe it was Langley because of its proximity to maybe a base or something, where the wireless signals got crisscrossed or something? Or didn't you run into that issue? I feel like you ran into that issue.
We've run into that issue multiple times,
where the wireless is getting
Langley does have a challenge with their wireless mic system, and we've been there twice now, and we've had the same problem with two different mic systems of mine. We've had to use theirs a couple times, which props to Vaughn and company. They have everything they need there. Like, their sound system is one of the few sound systems, I don't mean this to offend any track in the region, but one of the few sound systems I can walk in and go, I have full confidence it's not going to act up or do something stupid.
Yeah. Because
their mics that they have are the exact same brand that I carry, the same model that I use on our stuff, except theirs just is a different frequency range.
Yeah.
And apparently that frequency range is what it has to be with the proximity they are to the Air Force Base. I don't know. But we've run into some issues there with some of that stuff, but we've been able to interchange it, and back to some of the challenges. That's it. You got to be able to understand what's happening if you do run into an issue and fix it. And sometimes that's a little easier said than done.
Yeah.
We've learned all kinds of stuff that affects things.
So you've been doing this half a decade. I'm sure you've forgotten more than I'm ever going to know.
We've learned some of the wackiest stuff you would never believe.
Put some bubble gum on top of the antenna. It works better.
Honestly, we've had stuff like that. We've literally had stuff like that, where it's been like, wrap this thing in aluminum foil and it works better.
Yep.
And you're like, wait, what?
Like grandma's bunny ears on top of her old TV.
That's exactly what it's like. And so some of the stuff is amazing, but understanding what's happening, you go, well, I got to figure it out. I went to Lee Falk's shop last year to try to we tried to fabricate a solution for something we realized a problem was happening with. And my fabrication skills aren't the greatest, and Lee got to see that firsthand. So after about...
I bet he told you about it too.
Oh yeah, he did. So after about an hour, he said, let me see that. And about 10 minutes, it was done.
Nice.
But yeah, we've got all kinds of stuff. And some you can't solve day of. You got to solve them the next time you go there. because you bring everything you think you're going to need, and you didn't bring what you did need.
Yeah. That's something. Did you ever feel like, because at the time you were doing announcing, you had gotten a couple of chances to work with Motor Racing Network. I think you did a couple of the Xfinity Series, Busch Series, whatever it was. You'd gotten to do a few of those races, and this was coming along too. Did you get to a point where you feel like you kind of had to make a choice, like, all right, do I pursue announcing or do I pursue this? Like, did you get to that point, or was it very clear in your head which way you wanted to go?
It's still not clear in my head, because I enjoy being on the microphone. But I also look back and I look at people like Joe Moore, Rick Benjamin, folks like that, where they still got to be on the microphone and they still own their production company. So they got to do the best of both worlds. And at the time, I didn't really have to pick between the two of them, because I did like the idea of the MRN stuff. And it was fun, and it was great, and it's one, few people get the opportunity to even do it once. I got to do it 3 times. So that's great in my mind. That's fantastic.
I remember the third one. What was the third one?
So the third one was my debut, my audition, if you will.
Oh, okay.
I did what's now.
You did what was it? 2 in Iowa?
I did 2 Xfinity races in Iowa.
Yeah.
And the year before that, I got to do what's now an IMSA series race at Road America.
Oh man.
And, yes. And you want to talk about challenging?
Road course.
Well, yeah. So let's go down this path.
Yeah, let's go down this path.
Okay,
Take us down the road.
I try to remember everybody puts their pants on the same way I do. Sometimes, you know what I mean? 1 leg at a time, whatever. But for me, obviously, as any announcer would be, getting to even have the opportunity to do one of those things is a dream come true, right? Yeah. Like, it's the whole, holy cow, I'm legit, I've made it, I'm something or somebody now, right? And so I got all the details, like, okay, we're going to ship you up to Road America and blah, 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 and this, that, and the other. Okay, cool. Yours is going to be an on-air audition, so it's not going to be like the auditions that a lot of guys do, where it's, okay, we're going to send you out in turn 3 for a practice session, and we're going to call it like a race. No, yours is an on-air audition. And I was fortunate enough that Steve Post and Kyle Rickey were at the summer shootout a lot, and they were the two that really had vouched for me. So they got to see me, and they knew it. So Ryan and everybody were entrusted their judgment. I don't know if that was smart or not on their part, but
it might have put them in hot water.
Right. But they trust their judgment. So, okay, we're gonna put you on for an on-air audition.
Okay, where were you positioned?
I was in turn 7, left-hander. After you come out, right before you go to the East Johnsonville Bridge.
Okay.
So you're come down, hurry down, you're hard on the brakes, left-hander, and you go back around the carousel and back on the back side of the course.
Were you on the ground, or did you have some funky scaffolding or a billboard
I had a
to stand
grandstand.
on? Oh, okay. So okay. That's a little more stable.
It's a little more
I've
stable.
heard horror stories of them standing up on billboards, and I'm like, boy, I'd be scared to death.
It must have been some of the short tracks we go to for camera purchase.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So
but in any case, so I go out there and everybody's cool. Like Bagley was on the broadcast. Who else was out there in that deal? Eli Gold, Jason Toy, I forget his last name, but Dan from California. He was out there on it. I think Pete Bastoni was on pit road. I think Tony Rizzuti was on pit road. And Ryan Horn was producing the thing on site. I think that was everybody. But for me, and probably kind of like you, as a kid that grew up, in the 80s and 90s listening. I mean, I'll never forget running back and forth to the beach when I was a kid and in the back seat just listening to the race. And you'd have Eli Gold and Barney Hall and all those guys, and that was who the race was broadcast through. Yeah. So here I am at Road America, and it's like, wow, I'm on a show with guys I looked up to as a kid. Like, these are my idols. This is cool, right? And they're all fine and great, and they're great guys, and talk to them, get to know them a little bit, and everything's good, start to hit it off, and things are great. So we get out there, and I'm starting to psych myself up for this deal, right?
Okay. Anxiety's going up.
Of course, and most anybody can understand why, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting there, and Eli's getting in position in the booth, and Jason's in the booth, and we all start going out to our turn positions. And Ryan Horn's sitting there, and I'm like, okay, I got this. And mind you, this is sports car racing. I'm not 100% familiar with the drivers. I've crammed the last week and a half, 2 weeks. I got notes, I got charts, I got the IMSA app, I've got all this other stuff, right? And I've tried to go through the pits all weekend and learn who's in what car and talk to people and blah, 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 blah. So I'm ready to go out. And it's like, okay, I think I've got this. Still not 100% confident. But it's like, I think I got this.
Yeah.
Poor Ryan Horns before I leave. Tony, don't F it up.
Great advice. that could apply to any situation. Don't F it up.
So, it's like...
Did you respond or did you go, try not to?
It was kind of a half and a half of the both of them.
I hope I don't.
Right. So that really didn't get me too wound up, because I think it was more to break the ice than anything. Because to be in his position, you have to be a good understander of people and how they operate and everything like that. So that didn't throw him too much of a loop, but it was still enough of like, oh boy, you're getting ready to go do the biggest show of your career.
This ain't no warm-up.
This ain't no warm-up, right. So we go out there and we do our scene sets and we do all this other stuff, and you go over the stuff in your head. You know, first 5-6 laps there's action, and then the field gets spread out. By that point, it's like, okay, the nerves are done. They go to storytelling mode in the booth, and then you're like, okay, we're all right. We're starting to figure this out. We're doing our thing. We're good. And I'll never forget. It was one of those. I guess sports car racing is actionless, generally speaking, which is a good thing. But when you're in the booth, you have to tell stories and this, that, and the other on radio because it's hard to do. So, you know, you sit there in your corner like, okay, here comes the DP cars, here comes the GT. Okay, yay, they're passing, yay, whatever. Well, we had an incident, and about halfway through the race is when they did their driver changes. So everybody's getting in a new car, this, that, and the other. And there was, I think, I forget what it was, one of the prototypes blew up coming down the hill towards me. We're in break. Hey, guys, one of these cars just blew up over here. Okay, well, we can't come back from break. Okay, cool, great, blah, blah, blah. So we come back, and Eli and Jason take it in the booth, and they're coming through, and they're doing their thing. And, oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And before they can come to me to recap this car that's blown up and who it was,
yeah,
the field comes barreling off of turn 6, which is the right-hander there at top of the hill. And I remember in our pre-production meetings, you know, you always have these questions, right? What happens if this? What happens if that? One of them obviously is, well, if they're crashing or whatever, what's the deal? Like, you hear it on radio, but you don't know if there's like protocol or what's going on. And it's simply, well, just chime in. Okay.
Yeah, you got the code word, trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, they're sitting there coming back. They're ready to come to me to recap what happened with this car that blew up. So the entire field comes off of turn 6, it seems like, because it's after driver changes, whatever else, and they top the hill, and they're probably 30 to 45 seconds coming to me anyway from finishing up. And all of a sudden, I remember seeing like 3 cars just go straight off the hill into the grass.
Missed the turn completely.
Missed the turn completely. If you're smart, you've put 2 and 2 together here. Car blew up in front of me, they hit the hill. Yeah. You can figure this out. So I'll never forget. I'm like, oh boy, this is it. Like, this goes by in slow motion, right? It's like, this is the moment. Like, don't screw it up. Now, this is right after driver changes.
Okay.
So we're like maybe 2 laps into the new stint for these guys to know who just climbed out of the car and who climbed in the car. Here's the button. Here we go. Don't screw it up. Here we go. Push the button. Trouble turn 6. Blah, 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 blah. The Ferraris are off, and this guy's off, and that's off. And then went flew. It's like, oh, okay, got that over with, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I screwed it up too badly. Well, afterwards, no, everything was good, this, that, and the other, but it was like, you're on a show with your idols, and you got this, and like, you have the only action of the day in your corner. I don't know. For me, it was a big deal. For everybody else, probably like, okay, whatever. But for me, it was like, wow.
That was your point. It was your chance to chime up, to chime in and add something meaningful.
Right, exactly. But that was one of those moments of, you better get this right, and we did, and they got to do some other events, and then, I don't know if they had too much talent for what they were doing, or if they decided to scale back or change things, or if I screwed something up, who knows. But hadn't done anything since the Iowa race in, 14, I think it was, which is all fine and good. I mean, I'm still blessed to have got the chance to do 3 of them. I still look at the shirts in my closet every day and go, wow, I got to do that.
Okay, so those weren't to turn those back in.
No, no, because I said Grand Am on them now.
Oh.
The first one says Grand Am on it, right?
That's cool.
So that's not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then obviously the ones for the Xfinity stuff say, voice of NASCAR. It's like, wow, I got those. There's not a lot of people that have those.
Did you get to keep the hat?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah. So I've still got those sitting in the closet. Like, wow, that's it's one of those little trophies you've got. Like, wow, I got to do this.
It's pretty cool.
But yeah, I still liked it. But by that point, the video was starting to not really take off, but it was becoming more of an interest.
Yeah.
And what I did learn through the process was I didn't like having to be at somebody else's discretion as to whether I could do something that I felt I was good at.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
it does, because if you're at that, you're brought in to announce.
Correct.
Whereas if it's like one of your shows that you stream, maybe you can be on the camera that's following the leader, or maybe you're the guy on the scissor lift that's got them going down the back, or you're the wireless.
Right.
Or you can play with your graphics and you can find new ways to do that. I can see that.
Or I can just be the announcer because I think I need to be the announcer.
Yeah,
or whatever, right?
A little more freedom.
Exactly. Or I can hire you to be the announcer because I think you're better than I am, or whatever. But I get to make that decision, right? And I'm not going to say they make bad decisions, because they make great decisions over there. They've proven that. But you always want to think that you are always better than an option that somebody goes with if you think you were eligible for the same spot, right? We've all been there and had the job interview and like, I don't know why they hired him or her. Yeah. I'm better than that person, right? We've all been there. So by doing that, I'm like, well, I get to make the call, right? So instead of, waiting on somebody else to say, hey, we want you to come announce this big event. Well, if I own the production company and I really want to announce this big event and we get the event, I can do the event. Yeah. I can make that call. Screw it. So anybody who owns their own business will tell you it's a blessing and a curse, because you get to make those cool calls about that. Who does what, who does things, and who, and whatever. So, but you also have all the headache that comes with it.
Yeah, the buck stops with you.
Right.
If it sucks or screws up, it's your fault. Well, not you know what I mean.
It's still always my fault.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I just blame you anyway.
But yeah, so there's a blessing and a curse to that. But ultimately, I like the fact that I got to make more of those decisions, the creative decisions, and as we've gone on, more business decisions, the different things, right? So I don't know if that would have continued, if I really would have wanted to continue or not. If somebody approached me with that opportunity today, I would certainly consider it. I'm not going to say what direction it would go, because I don't know, right? Yeah. The pit row stuff's going pretty well. I've got some good people I think can handle a lot of this stuff, but the first time you have to leave your baby in somebody else's hands, sometimes you're a little reluctant.
Well, sure. Of course.
But
I think I've been there for a couple of those.
You have. and the guys have stepped up and done a fantastic job. So every time I leave, I'm a little bit more at ease leaving the baby in somebody else's hands. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. But ultimately, I didn't really have to pick. It kind of picked itself, if you will. And so I've never thought about it. Never really had a chance to think about what if I did this, or what if that's just the way it happened.
I know as we've worked together and you've started to expand your portfolio as far as what Pit Road TV covers, it's not just asphalt circle track racing. I think most people probably get introduced to you by Cars Tour, and then they find out, well, wait, there's other asphalt races, there's the Legends races, you do some dirt stuff. The fun thing for me was cool was when you told me you got to start working a little bit with doing the demo derbies. And I think on some of those, I think you were maybe just producing, but how much fun were those? Because that seems like such a completely different animal from what we're used to being, where, all right, we're going to this circle track, we're going to run 125 laps, there's going to be competition cautions, there's 20-something cars, see who gets there first.
Right.
Demo derby seems like a completely different bunch. Tell
Very
me about
much.
that.
So ultimately what happened was probably about 3-4 years ago now, I got called in to, apparently it's like one of the bigger ones, and I didn't know this is a thing. I don't even know if it is a thing, but for this event it's a thing. But they do them in Kansas twice a year. There's an arena there that has this giant demo derby. And I think it's something we would call backgate, but ultimately looking at the amount of tickets they sell, the amount of beer they sell, I think it's also pretty good on the front gate. But ultimately they have a Jumbotron, they do some other stuff with some different things, and they said, look, it's becoming a disaster between the people that run the demo derby part of it and the people that run the fan experience part of it. And they essentially said, look, we've heard this from this guy, whatever, we want you to come in here and kind of try to run that ship, to try to manage the two of them. Which ultimately wasn't that hard. By comparison, just because it's something we've done in a lot of cases. So it's just taking all that knowledge that I've learned either from my own shows or shows at Charlotte or Rockingham or wherever, and saying, all right, this is how they do it, this is how you guys need to do it, and just kind of overseeing that. And there have been some technical things. Okay, you need to hook your box up this way so it does this on the monitor and whatever. But very similar and very different.
Yeah.
To address your question. It's still an event. It has a start, it has an end, it has the stuff in the middle. The stuff in the middle is strawberry instead of chocolate. That's basically the biggest difference. So learning how that worked and what the fan base wanted to see in the grandstands and whatever else. I mean, it was certainly a challenge, but after about a year, 2 years, like, okay, we figured this out. You know, you're still learning. You're always learning.
You didn't do any onboard cameras, did you?
I didn't, but I know a guy that did.
I can't imagine.
So, funny
I bet
story.
it'd be a great visual if you just didn't destroy equipment doing it.
Oh, no, we just destroy human beings instead.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
So long story short, there's a guy I work with on some of the stuff. His name's Nate, and he does a lot of the stuff now with IMCA. But Nate was down there, and he was screwing around, and he was like, hey, I went through some onboard cameras on some of these deals and just kind of do whatever. I was like, I don't really care. Go for it. Yeah. You know, right? So, not that he really, that's my approval. He was going to do it anyway, but it was like, what do you think? Like, just to, you know, kind of make sure the idea that he wasn't crazy. I'm like, I don't think it's a great idea. Go for it. Okay. So we go through some derby stuff and whatever, and he comes back up there a few hours like, dude, I got the most awesome onboard you got to put up on the screen. I'm like, okay, I'm thinking, it can't be that awesome, right? It's an onboard, it gets hit, okay, something dings and flies in the cockpit, whatever.
Yeah.
I was wrong. So there's this guy, goes out and he's in his car, blah, blah, blah. Okay, they fire derby, he gets hit a few times, all right. Well, what you don't know about derby is most of the serious derby promoters apparently make you wear a seatbelt, as they should. Some apparently in this world don't make you wear a seatbelt.
That just seems dumb to me. Me, myself, I'm like, I'm about to go out here and get tagged at least 8-10 times. I might want to have something that's going to hold my butt in the seat.
I don't disagree with you. But some people would rather run without a seat. A lot of those guys don't run with roll bar padding or anything, which is a little mind-blowing to me, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
They at least make them wear a helmet. So,
well, at least we got that.
At least we got a helmet. Yeah. So, you know, it's like, all right, so this guy's in there, and then they check the belt for the go on track, and they do the whole thing. So this guy's going through, and he gets hit a few times. Well, there was one point, and this has been like 2-3 years now, so I forget exactly how it played out, but the guy got hit really good, and it kind of dinged his bell. You can kind of see he was stuttering like a prize fighter, like, oh man, wow, hello. And it kind of moved him around in the seat. So he didn't get a chance to get up and break his stick or do anything to like say, all right, I'm done. So before he can do that, some guy lines him up. Oh. And now, to give you an idea how these derby cars work, like these aren't just like your street car. These are sleds. Like there was a guy that showed up, or a team that showed up on one of these deals a couple years ago, and they had to have 2 car haulers because they were over limit on the DOT numbers on their cars to get them there.
This ain't just Grandpa's Cadillac.
No.
This is Grandpa's Cadillac with like lead in the
These
front.
are cars that literally weigh 4 tons.
Oh my gosh.
And they're dumping $50,000 or $60,000 into an engine to have enough power to move 4 tons.
My goodness.
Because you're going to mass times velocity equals force, right? So we got the mass, and now you need the motor for the velocity. So you can imagine that railing into this other thing that has a lot of mass with no velocity creates a lot more force. So this guy's sitting there, and he gets lined up. And that car strikes, and next thing you see is this entire guy's body flying up in the air, down onto the drive shaft tube. Oh. And it happens like that.
Yeah.
It's just boom, up and down. Like, and you're like, whoa. And you see his head hit something, and you're like, holy cow. Like, he didn't have a seatbelt on. Well, you go back and look. Oh, no, he had his seatbelt on.
It got broke.
No, it slung him out of the seatbelt.
Oh.
This is like the 3-point. It wasn't like your 5-point type deal.
I'm thinking 5-point.
No, this is like your standard seatbelt in the car. Of course, that really rung his bell.
Yeah, I'd say that knocked his noggin loose.
So he tried to get back in the seat and get in the thing, and he got hit again and knocked halfway back over again. And he's scurrying even more to break his stick. Finally, he breaks his stick and he's done. He's like, okay, I'm out of here. But yeah, back to the onboard. We did a few of those, and those are interesting. But it's an event. You got to learn what the people want to see and what they appreciate, what makes it what it is, and that's what we do. So generally speaking, twice a year we go out and we punch buttons or help them push buttons or whatever on a Jumbotron in Kansas and have a lot of fun doing it. Make some content in the process, and it's a fun week.
Yeah. One staple people will probably know pit row for is any car store race, any circle track race. There's always that shot you guys have of usually at the flag stand or just past the flag stand. It's a steady camera. It's not manned by a person. It's just mounted. How many of those have you lost in 5 years?
Lost one.
Lost / destroyed? Only one.
Only one. We have taken a few others out of service because they would probably be better off being replaced, but they're still functional. They still work.
Yeah.
And we've had to pull them out once or twice before in an emergency, but we have taken them out of regular rotation. Yeah. But we have only ever lost one of them.
Who did that?
That would have been Cole Rouse at South Boston 3 years ago now, I think. Car got up on the wall, because there the wall is perpendicular to the earth, not the racetrack. So there's a slight angle. But he got shoved up into the wall, and he came down the front straightaway perpendicular and wiped it all out.
Nice.
And I forget who found it, because I found the mount. Like during the red flag, I went down, looked for the mount and everything, found the mount, found all the hardware. It's like, wow. And we're still using them, by the way.
Okay.
We're still using that mount.
The mount made it.
Yeah, the mount made it. It's still fine. But the camera, I'm like, where'd that little camera go, man? I don't know. I'm looking, I'm like, well, whatever, it's gone. But they're relatively cheap. I mean, they're not cheap, but they're relatively cheap by comparison. So I'm like, oh, well, whatever. At the end of the year, go buy another one for next year. All right. Well, about 3 or 4 weeks later, I find out roughly where it ended up. And I think it was in Jared Fryer's airbox. Because Richard Mellentine from Pigwire, apparently, I found this out through the grapevine. I was talking to somebody like, oh, yeah, we know who found that then. That's what that is. Oh, okay. So they told me. So I talked to Richard like, yeah, we thought it was traction control.
Oh, you could have got him in trouble.
Well, no, they didn't know.
If Ricky Brooks had seen it, he would have called him for traction.
Well, it was just loose. Like, it was just loose in between the radiator and everything in there. But,
something that wasn't supposed to be there.
Right. So they Googled what they could find on the camera, and they figured out what it was, and they were like, oh, that's not traction control. But they thought it was.
It's got to be Stevens's.
Right. Well, they're like, well, they didn't really know until I asked him. He's like, oh, that makes sense. And that's why it's your camera. Okay, yeah, we found your camera.
Did they send it back?
I have it.
Nice.
I have it.
Need to frame that thing like an autographed baseball.
Honestly, if I could reattach some of the solder joints, I'm pretty sure it would still work.
Hey. And if it gets destroyed, you can be like, well, it's like a cat. It's already lived longer than it was supposed to.
That one had been hit about 4 or 5 times before then.
Yeah.
We took one to a dirt track race once, and it got hit 3 times in the same night. Like spoilers come off the corner because it was so close to the racetrack. Just whap, whap, whap. 3 times in the same night, still lives.
Thing's a tank.
Had one get landed on by a crate late model.
Oh.
In fact, it still has a scratch on it. Clarksville, Tennessee, a couple years ago.
The prelim to the toilet bowl, I guess?
Either the prelim or the night of, one of the two, yeah. But I thought I lost it because I was watching the cameras and I'm calling the shots and everything, and this guy goes up, almost takes out the flag stand, tries to take out the fence. And I go back and I look down after the wreck has happened. I'm like, crap, I lost camera 2 or whatever it was. I'm like, oh, crap. And I look what happened. I'm like, oh, we just wiped out my speed shot.
Yep.
I got to have this for Cars Tour next week. Damn it. All right, let's go down and see if we can find it.
Yeah.
So, like, maybe we got lucky and it just came unplugged. I'm thinking the cable, right?
Yeah.
It came unplugged because where the guy hit, apparently it grabbed the cord we had it plugged into, yanked the cord out of the socket. Because when I went back and looked at the replay, I realized what happened. We showed the replay, and we lost signal before the car got to the camera.
Okay. So
it actually ripped the power source away from the camera is what happened. So I get down there, I'm like, the camera might still be alive. So this is like a 20-minute red flag, cleaning this guy up, this barrel roll, taking out the flag stand, the whole thing, right? And I'm down there looking, and sure enough, camera's still where I left it. Everything's still attached to it. I think it was off aim maybe by a little bit. It might not even been. I was like, wait a second. Okay, this is good. Yeah. So we start finding, sure enough, we plug it back into the power source and fires right up.
Nice.
So we use it again for the rest of the race. But it hit the camera because there is a scar on the camera from where something, presumably the race car, came down on top of it.
You know what? As long as you get the shot, I mean, it's the cheapest camera to destroy. So as long as you get the shot, I guess.
As long as we don't destroy any of our camera ops, we'll be okay. We tried that in Boone this year.
Yeah. You got to be careful.
Well, we tried that. One of my guys, Ian, he's been one of our, I don't want to say since the very beginning, but he's been a long time member of the staff. And we took him to Boone, Iowa this year. And I won't forget this because I was sitting in the hotel after the Carteret County Cars Tour race watching it happen live. So I got the computer up and everybody's, talking about what happened that night. I'm like, well, here you go. Enjoy some racing from Boone, folks. Get your mind off this. So we're like third race in, we're watching. They're still in heats that night, and because of the rain and everything else. So we're watching this, and it might have been on feature. I don't remember. But anyway, so Ian's down there working an infield camera for them at Boone. And I'm watching this race. Man, it's a good race. And all of a sudden, I see the leader spin. I see him start to spin towards the infield. I was like, oh, that sucks for... Oh, he's heading down there. Man, well, earlier that week, I had been in Boone. And there were a few close calls that Ian had down there. He's like, man, I'm glad you told me to stand here or do this or do that. I was like, yeah. Okay.
Because to set the scene for people that don't know, this racetrack in Boone, there's no infield wall, no infield jersey barrier. It's pretty much just open.
It's all light poles.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's all it is. And the light poles aren't even protected.
Right, and they do that because they don't like to throw yellow flags, and the guy can go down the grass, save it, drive through, and keep going and rejoin the field. Whereas if you have walls, it destroys race cars. I think anybody that's driven on a racetrack with walls can tell you walls destroy race cars. So that's kind of why they do that. So this stock car, or kind of like a street stock basically is what we would call them here, but they call them stock cars out there, and they're a little beefier than a regular street stock. It's a stock car, spins out and starts heading towards the infield. I was like, oh man, he's flying, that's good. And then you realize at some point in that slide of where he's going to end up. And in my mind, I'm like, Ian is in point A, car is in point B, heading to point A.
And he's coming.
This is not going to end well, folks. And probably about 20 feet in front of Ian is where he was smart enough, and he's, to put up something solid between himself and race cars. That thing that was solid happened to be a light pole.
Yep. That
the car came, wrapped itself around, and to finish the story, knocked all the lights off the pole. They fell down on the car. Ian's walking away by that point with this light flashing before his eyes, going, I can't believe I just survived that. Then he looks around and sees the chaos, and he goes, holy cow.
I missed a lot.
So yeah, as long as we don't have those moments, we're okay. As much as I complain about it, and I'll raise hell about replacing the camera or whatever else, I would rather replace those than replace people.
Yeah. So to put a button on everything, half a decade into it now, is there a specific show or shows that you look back on and you're just like, heck yeah, like we pulled that off and we did a damn good job of doing it. Like, I'm proud of what we did. Is there a couple that you can think of off the top of your head?
The very first one.
Okay, that's fair.
We've done some before that, but I would say the very first one for me that really rung that bell of, wow, we actually did this, was the very first Cars Tour race. And if anybody remembers back then, it seems so long ago, but it was almost 6 years ago now. It was the basic deal, right? It was what everybody had at the time. You had a camera and some audio and some internet, and that's just what you sent out to the world, and that everybody was glad to have it at the time, right? The fact we pulled that off, because among other things, one, anybody that's been to Southern National knows the internet service and cell service there is virtually non-existent.
Yep.
That's one. Two, just the fact we did it. Man, we did this, like the viewership was this. We didn't lose our butt. We didn't do this, whatever. Like, this is great. All right, we can go do the second one now. So it just gives you that confidence to go forward and do the rest of them. So I would say that's one of the ones that sticks out as, wow, we pulled it off. I'm proud of what we're able to knock out here.
Yeah.
And since then, there have been others that keep, being those benchmarks you look at. And I remember Myrtle Beach, the year Myatt Snyder won it, was our first in-house multi-camera show, which now seems like a no-brainer because we do them all the time, right? But at the time, that was a big deal. The logistics, the stuff you had to get, the things you had to be careful of. I mean, there were a lot of things, the expenses between people and travel and everything else. So there was a lot involved in that. I think that weekend, actually, we didn't really make a whole lot of money. I think I may have actually lost money on that weekend.
Yeah.
But either way, we still were able to accomplish it. And it was like, wow, we actually did it. Now we kind of know where we're at and what it will stand and everything else. But we were able to knock it out. Okay, this is good. So that one stands out as a big deal. And I'd say probably from that point forward, there's a lot of other little ones to say, yeah, man, we were able to knock this out and do that. But a lot of them are the little things in the show that folks may or may not notice that we're able to incorporate.
Now you got the instant replay.
Right, which we've had that for 3-4 years now.
And you got your little, what's that doodle pad? What do you call it?
It's technically called a telestrator.
Ah, that thing. I always just call it like the John Madden tool because he's the one that was always doing it and
funny
drawing
you say that.
weird things on it.
You remember Cisco?
Yeah.
He used to be our on-site producer and director, and Cisco now works for iRacing. He went to go get his dream job. I've had 3 or 4 people leave me to go get their dream job.
You're not the dream.
I'm not the dream, apparently. Who'd have thunk it? But no, I'm happy for him. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I'm glad they can do that, and that's great. I'm thrilled for him. So anyway, Cisco was screwing around with this telestrator one day, and he's like, "It's the Tony Strator."
Not a compliment.
I don't know what it was. So I was like, well, I guess if you have to brand it, then that's what you're going to brand it. That's fine.
Yeah.
Well, he went back into like the early 90s Fox football shows where this was new technology.
Yeah.
And found where they had the John Madden little thing on like a little graphic that spun around in the corner, and they called it whatever they called it.
Yeah.
So anytime he would pull up the telestrator, he built it to where it pulled up with that graphic, but instead of a John Madden head and a name, he made it Tony Strator, something with my head on it spinning around in the corner.
I never noticed this.
Yes.
I got to go back and find this.
You have to go back and find it. Yep.
I bet you had a great look on your face, too. You already had that.
I'm sitting there going, well, whatever it takes. I don't care.
If they don't know what I look like now, this will surely help the cause.
Well, more than anything, I'm just like, you know what? Personality is good for the show.
Oh, yeah.
I think we get way too stale in a lot of the stuff we do. And I think you can have flavor and still be professional and still uphold everybody's interests. The problem we've gotten into is I don't want to use the term politically correct, but ultimately it's what it is. We get so scared to do anything different for fear.
I might say the wrong thing. I might offend somebody.
Exactly. And you still have some of that, but I think you can still have some personality and have some flair and do things a different way and still make all those entities and those interests happy. Case in point, not everything on TV is the same, right? Some people want to watch crazy comedy. Some people want to watch, or listen to NPR or rock music on the radio, whatever. They're not all the same, but they can still be within that grasp of quote unquote good taste. And I think in motorsports, we've gotten, especially on pavement, we have gotten so wrapped up in being this tightly wound, perfect little race car driver, representative person that has so little personality, I couldn't tell you driver A from driver Z from driver X. They're all the same. And I think it's important you can have that identity, whether it be, in our case, how you produce a show and how it sounds and how it looks and what you do on air, versus as a driver, how you race people, how you do interviews, the personality you project. There's a lot you can do in that box and still be well within the defined limits of that box. And everybody just wants to be in one spot, and it's kind of a bad thing, I think.
Gotcha. Well, Tony, this has been enlightening. Even though I've worked with you for a couple of years now, I feel like I've learned a lot.
That's it. We're only 20 minutes in. What are you talking about?
Oh, well, hold on a second. Let me look at the timer. Heck no, we're an hour in. We got to sign off.
I feel like the Langley issue now, like the Langley-Austin part 2. There's another one.
Langley, I think, is going to beat you. But wish you the best going into the new year, and I know we'll work together some more until you finally say the wrong thing to me and I just snap and tear your head off. But until that time
Speaking of tearing your head off, so did you ever tell the story about we tried to tear your head off?
When was that?
Tri-County.
Well, you didn't drive. That was the drivers. And that wasn't even the car store. That was the support division. That was...
So we bring T-Dub out.
Yeah.
If you're going to roast me a little bit, I got to roast you here.
That's
how
fine.
This is going to work. So we bring T-Dub out and say, hey, and that was a weekend, I think.
That was a car store season opener.
It was a season opener. I think that was the first time we tried to do the multi-camera thing on the car store.
That was really the first time?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah, because you had the old mount that just ripped my forearms apart,
Yep.
bro. I was hurting.
Yeah, and you were a trooper. But I remember we had, Cisco was directing the show. We had this one kid from a college around that hadn't done one. He did okay. Had another kid that's up from around Kingsport or something, I think, on one of the other cameras. And we had you in the pits.
With Lenny.
With Lenny. The only sensible person in the entire group was with you.
Thank God.
So we send Tyler out on the back straightaway. And if you know Tri-County, everybody knows there's not any fencing there. You got plenty of sight lines. Like, Tyler, why don't you go down there inside turn 3 and be a camera on the backstretch?
Why not?
So Tyler, in his infinite wisdom, said, absolutely, I'll do that. Great. Thanks for being a team player. We appreciate it. Arms are burning. he can't feel him anymore. He's like,
Josh Berry's girlfriend at the time got mad at me.
I think Josh had already waved you off 6 times.
Yeah, I'm not making any friends today.
Yeah.
So go to turn 3. You won't get on anybody's nerves there.
And to clarify, Josh waved him off because
I got a little too close.
He was afraid there were things being shown that weren't being shown, but he didn't know that at the time. So we understood. We didn't take it personal. Everything's good. So we send Tyler back there. All right, Tyler, we got this limited race coming. Man, there's a great race coming, and this is happening for second or whatever. And we're using Tyler every other lap. Man, that's a great shot back there. Get a clear shot of what's happening on the back straightaway. And we come to Tyler 1 lap, and what happens?
Like a 3-car, they wreck in the middle of the track, because before that, in the Cars Tour race, I think the track had started coming apart.
It had.
So we were having track problems as is. I don't think they had lights working. So we're already in a rush. The track's coming apart, and 3 of them just kind of meet in the middle on the backstretch. And who's got a clear vantage point?
Perfect shot.
The wireless,
it was the perfect shot.
The wireless camera.
Perfect shot.
And you're up there announcing the whole time.
And I'm watching the monitor, going, "Wow! Oh man, they're crashing. They're heading right for Tyler," which didn't bother me because he was expendable at the time.
Yeah, you weren't gonna get hit.
So. And all of a sudden, then I see something start flying up. I'm not sure who saw it first, me or you.
Probably at the same time.
And that something just happened to be one giant fiberglass hood.
Not soft.
Well, they are fairly soft.
It caught perfect wind because it took off like a kite. And I'm already sort of like, your instinct tells you trouble's coming, back up. So I already backed up a little. Now this thing is coming, and I'm like, back up faster.
And we could see it in the video where you just kind of freeze and then you just start running backwards.
Yep.
And you go back and watch the archive from Tri-County that year, you can see it. It's like, Tyler's coming.
It's a lot of weight moving backwards.
That was a lot of hood coming towards you.
It was.
Yeah.
I got the shot.
You did get the shot. You nailed it.
Because you came over the radio and you were like, great job getting the shot. And I'm still like, heart beating. And Lenny stuck a microphone in my face.
I remember that.
We had him on camera, and he was like, Tyler, I need you to tell me what you saw. Saw my life flash before my eyes. Had fun telling my wife that I'm in the hospital in Granite Falls, North Carolina, because a hood hit me.
Back to that whole we can have flavor and still be within the bounds of good taste. That would be the case of that.
You would have never done that on NBC or
No,
Fox.
NBC wouldn't have done that. But, I mean, you can still do that and have fun. And it's...
And we told the story.
We told the story, right.
And then Lenny got cussed out in victory lane by the person that thought they won the race and didn't. So
Stephen Nasty was at that? Oh, no, I'm sorry. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't Stephen Nasty. Amber Lynn was down there having a fit.
Yeah, that was a whole different story. But yeah, so due to Tyler's wonderful intelligence, we have now dubbed him Tin Peg.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with what happened at the racetrack, although it might.
That was Cars Tour season opener at Kinley the Friday night before we went to Cracker Barrel.
Yep. And back before COVID, you actually had games on the table to play.
Yeah.
So anybody that's been to Cracker Barrel knows you played a little triangle game. You're proud of this one, aren't you?
I've been bad at it my whole life. I've always left at least, you leave 4 or more, you're an ignoramus. I've always left 4 or more. Like, it's nothing new to me, but I've never left 10.
So we pull the game out and I play a little bit, I think, or whatever, and Tyler starts to play. And after about 30 seconds, he looks over and goes, well, how'd I do that? And I look down and I go, you got to have more moves than that.
I was sitting, I handed it to you. I was like, please show me a move. And you're like, nope.
And he had 10 pegs left in the peg game.
And Tony...
all in a place that you could not make a move.
Tony not only took a picture of this, but called the waitress over.
Oh, no, back up. Stop.
Wait, did I miss something?
Oh, yeah, you did. The most important part. Everybody's entitled to be dumb once. Well, just don't do it again. Here, put the pegs back in. I don't know what you did, but don't do it again. 20 seconds later, I did it again.
That's when you call the waitress over.
That's when I call the waitress.
You're like, Debbie, come here and look at this in the middle of getting maple syrup. Come look at this loser.
So not only do you have a face for radio, you apparently have a brain for I don't know what.
And you know what? I'm gonna put a good bow on the story because the next day, I was pit reporting for you, and the super late model race, Stephen Wallace had blown up, and he was parked probably as far away from where the wireless camera would reach, but you said, just go try. So we went over there to get the interview, and in my PC mind, I'm thinking the number one rule of announcing is don't cuss. Yeah, if you sense a cuss word coming, that's what I always just got taught. Tony taught me otherwise. So I go.
Well, it can depend sometimes, but yes.
Stephen Wallace's motor has blown. I go to get the comment, and I barely even set it up. I'm just like, let me get it straight from the horse's mouth. Stephen, what happened? And he basically tells me, not basically, he did. Motor blew all the S word that people use to describe poo. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, he just cussed. Like, Tony is gonna flip. Like, I'm so. And I cued before I could cue the radio to be like, Tony, I'm sorry. Tony Stevens is in my ear. Tyler, that's great. Now get back up to the front. I'm like, oh. And you had to come on and was like, folks, we apologize for the language.
So yeah, ultimately,
Tony is the devil in my ear, getting me cussed out.
Now you're letting people in on kind of the behind the scenes deal of this.
Yep.
So whether you're watching on Fox or NBC or Pit Row or wherever, the number one rule is you do want to be PC, or in the sense of you don't want to have people cussing everywhere. You want to be family friendly. So, when you're on broadcast, so we're going to go into some of the comm law stuff here.
Yeah.
The FCC basically says the more hoops you have to get through to see the content, the less strict we're going to be about it. Generally speaking, if you have to pay for the content, they don't care.
Yeah.
Okay?
It's like HBO. You pay for HBO. Yeah.
Correct. They can pretty much do whatever. And there are some other rules with that, but that's the general deal. Is if you've got to pay for it, it's pretty much Wild Wild West, do what you want to do. But you still want to maintain a level of decorum, because what a lot of people forget, and we even forget it sometimes, is, all right, somebody paid to watch this race. Maybe there's somebody's mom, brother, daughter, son, toddler, whatever. So you want to maintain a level of decorum and professionalism, because ultimately that's what everybody deserves, is what they expect, and that's what they should. But by the same token, every producer that's in Fox, NBC, Pit Row, whatever, we love the emotion, because the emotion is what everybody gets riled up about, right? Nobody gets riled up about Kyle Busch coming to a media center and going, yes, we lost, it sucked. Any other questions?
No, that's not what I want.
They get riled up when Kyle Busch goes in the media center, and I hate to make Kyle the example because he's not the only one, but, whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Puts the mic down, slams it down. The emotion is ultimately what the story is, right? Why is he so pissed off that he did whatever? Well, that's what makes it what it is, right? Nobody goes to the hockey game just to watch hockey. I mean, the purists do, sure. Yeah. Nobody goes to the auto race just to watch the racing.
I want to see both.
You want to see some action. You want to see the emotion. You want to see the drama, because our sport's not about cars going in circles. Our sport is about people.
Yeah.
And without the emotion, without all that, you can't tell a story, right? I mean, just think about if the 1979 Daytona 500, they got out and said, well, tore up another car. See you next week.
No.
They still ride that today, 40 years later.
Yep.
Right? It's all about the emotion. And so there's a producer in the background knowing what's likely going to happen. However, plausible deniability is there, because on air, you don't know what's going to happen, right? So anybody that knows Steve Wallace knows if you go to Steve Wallace when he's less than happy, you're probably going to get a typical Steve Wallace soundbite. Steve's a great dude, and he'll tell you like it is, and he doesn't care, which is fine, and we all know that. So we knew, you knew, most likely.
I knew what was coming.
And I knew what was coming.
Yeah, you really knew what was coming.
Or at least we expected it. We didn't know, but we expected it could happen, right? So we're like, all right, it could happen. So, as long as you didn't preface it and say it yourself like it was intentional, because you had control of the microphone, it's our broadcast to tell whatever story we're telling. And you've seen it more now on the Fox stuff, where people will let some stuff go and they come back and say, oh, wow, we're sorry about that.
Yeah.
Because they are. They don't want that to happen, but they do want the emotional reaction.
Yeah.
And every now and then, we're all human. You forget to think that extra little half second before you talk, and you get a couple of good sound bites. But ultimately, we know that emotion's going to happen. And some drivers, I think, probably hate me for that, because, like, man,
they might think maybe like you set them up or something.
Right. And honestly, it's not about trying to make anybody necessarily into a good guy or a bad guy, but it's about playing that emotion and playing the storylines. And because again, nobody's gonna buy a ticket to watch cars go in circles by comparison to if this guy is the one they all hate because he's going to do whatever, or this guy, I like him, he's going to go rough them up, whatever it is. It helps them identify with that person because they've all felt that way at some point, good, bad, or ugly. So we're trying to build personalities, we're trying to build stories, and emotion is part of that, good and bad. We want to see the guy cheering and crying in victory lane and telling that story because they used their last $12 that we're going to pay for the mortgage to win $10,000, and now they can go home and pay two house payments, right? I mean, that's not the smartest thing in the world, but it's a good story. Yeah. We want to see that story. We want to see that just as much as we want to see the guy that, got PO'd because motor blew up and he just had a bad week and whatever else. That's part of it too.
Yep.
So yeah, sometimes we know what's going to happen, but sometimes we don't know what's going to happen, believe it or not. But even so, we know when a good emotional reaction is going to come, and we know emotion is ultimately what sells stuff, and people like to watch it.
Yep.
I think that's no lie. I don't think it's a secret.
I think that's a good place to end it on. So, thank you very much, Tony. Appreciate
Thanks for bringing me out here to the nice, shady Sheets parking lot.
You're in the sun.
It's
complaining.
I know, but so
we're sitting
not
in the
to make your podcast that much longer.
This. How long are we? We're an hour 13. We're way long.
You're good. So Tyler calls me and says, "Hey, you want to do my podcast?" Yeah, sure, not a problem. What are we doing? Well, can you meet me somewhere halfway in between A and B? Yeah, sure, okay. I'm thinking we're going to go somewhere halfway decent, blah, 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 sit down somewhere nice, like a buddy at his house.
Nope.
Oh, no.
Parking lot.
Can you meet me over here? We'll just go to the parking lot in the back of my truck. So I pull into the Sheets, back into the spot here. There's county cops sitting up here. There's people driving by. And here we are in the back of the pickup truck. I feel like it's a bad drug deal getting ready to go down with wires and snacks and whatever. Somebody in there is probably going, what are those guys doing out there?
Thank you for listening to yet another edition of the Half Priced Concessions Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Overcast, Himalaya, Castro, whatever podcast app you're using. Please hit the subscribe button. If there's a section to leave us a rating and review, please leave us a good one. It would really help us out a ton. Also, if you're listening on our YouTube page, hit the subscribe button there. That way, you'll get notified every time we put out new episodes. Also, you can email the show. The email address is halfpricedconcessionspodcast@gmail.com. You can email us questions, concerns, ideas for future episodes, anything and everything. We'll definitely respond to it, and we just appreciate you listening. Also, if you have friends or family who want to listen but don't want to go to YouTube and don't have a podcast app, you can listen to every episode on our website. That's www.anchor.fm/HPC podcast. Thank you for listening. My name is Tyler Williams, and I hope that you have a great day.